Peace, everyone. It's Black High Priestess. Hope you guys don't mind. I got my face mask on today. It's a charcoal face mask, doing some exfoliating. And I like the way I look with the mask on. Keeps me aligned with my Ejuli Bridget Loa, my mystery of Ejuli Bridget. So I'm just gonna pull a scripture real quick, and we're gonna jump into the subject. See what the Most High has to say. I've got Esther 6, verse 12. Mordecai then returned to court while Haman in grief hurried off home with his head veiled. All right, I'm going to stop there. Mordecai then returned to court, again, dealing with the barons, my Ejuli Bridget, Mama Bridget, while Haman in grief hurried off home with his head veiled. Yeah. Speaking of veils, the subject that I'm going to talk about today is I did receive another question and inquiry about my last upload, which was why did I say that the root word of craft is witch, referring to the word witchcraft. And so I wanted to respond to that, and, just going along with what the scripture, the foundation the scripture laid. First and foremost, I want to refer to some basic definitions, do a little adjusting of our perspective of witches, and kind of talk about why I said that witch is the root word of craft. Essentially, root work is being a witch is the root work of the craft. So when I say witch is the root word of craft, meaning witchcraft, I'm referring to the root work, which is Vodun, which root work also deals with the power of the black woman. Witchcraft is perceived a little bit differently in African spiritual traditions of Vodun than it is in European or Eurocentric ideologies and traditions of Vodun. And these differences are directly related to the way ancient black men perceived the black woman, as opposed to the way ancient European men perceived their women. That has a lot to do with climate. I'm going to do another upload about MGTOW and white society and everything, but I just want to take a little excerpt from that upload I'm going to do and mention here that you have to understand in African culture, well, not in African culture, in any culture, the elements of culture are related to the climate and the terrain and the habitat of that culture. So culture, I believe, has like 7, 8 main components. I don't know if I can name them all off the top of my head, but culture is composed of language, music, clothing, rituals, which can also be holidays, the food that you eat. And there's a couple more, customs that define any given culture. So the difference between the way in African traditions that a woman who is gifted, being a witch, or a woman who has certain supernatural traits is perceived is different than the way in Eurocentric heritage that a woman who is gifted is perceived. Again, this relates to the climate that defines African culture versus European culture. African culture deals with 100-degree climate, the sun shining a lot, dealing with solar energy. European culture deals a lot with the Black Plague, the Ice Ages, and some say, so to speak, the Neanderthal or the climate of the Caucasus Mountains, or the habitat that Caucasians are known to come from, being the Caucasus Mountains. Again, warm climate is conducive to procreation. Warm climate, things grow in plenty. There are resources. So it's conducive to procreating and people flourishing and having a bunch of children and inhabiting the land and flourishing. Ice age climate, typical European climate, of the Caucasus Mountains and things like that. And again, getting into the Black Plague and different things that were ancient normal in Europe because of the nature of the people that live there. Plague and disease. Okay. That climate is more conducive to sickness. Being cold can kill off germs and things like that. But living in that cold weather, the wear and tear on your body is kind of supports some of the sicknesses that are known. And I'm not saying that Europe is all sick. You know what I'm saying? There's sicknesses in Africa to this day and things like that. But what I'm saying is the way white men or European men perceived women had to do with the fact that procreation was a burden to European men because of the climate. So because that climate and having babies was so burdensome to the men of that climate and of that culture, women were often demonized. Because women were considered a burden. Women have babies after sex. So women were considered a burden because the woman would get pregnant and create a further burden for this white man who's living in a climate that's not very conducive to procreation. When you're constantly in that survival mode. So I want people to kind of understand there's principles to these things. And I'm relating that to why women who are gifted, women who are of the craft are looked at as negative in European culture as opposed to an Afrocentric culture or in Vodun, where women who are gifted are considered the Iyami, the Ajay, the mothers, the women who rule the marketplace. They are considered an integral part of the community, although there is still some fear and loathing of women and men who are gifted in African culture. I want to take this definition that from the dictionary. I got this online. But again, I want to start this upload talking about this definition to help you all understand why I'm going to change this definition in order to respond to the question, why is witch the root word of craft? So the definition here, witch, and again, I just got this online. I typed it online. It's the main dictionary. Every dictionary is worded a little differently. You know, some are better than others. For all intents and purposes, witch is a person skill. This is the definition that I got online. A woman thought to have magical powers, especially evil ones. Popularly depicted as wearing a black cloak, pointed hat, and flying on a broomstick. Again, this is the main definition of a witch. A woman thought to have magical powers. Remember the Salem witch trials, most of those women that they were burning were not witches. Most of the women were just attractive women that were probably being molested and raped, and then the men burned them because, again, European men have a problem with femininity. Back to Greco-Roman, where there was a celebration of homosexuality, but still loathing of women. European men always hated women and femininity. They were looked at as a burden. And that's why witch is looked at as a negative thing, because it comes from Eurocentric culture. to demonize a witch, when the reality of it is again, my definition of a witch, me being a witch, being a African witch, okay, being black, so to speak. I can't say what nation of Africa that I'm from, but practicing the dominant genetic inclinations of a witch. Again, a woman thought to have magical powers, especially evil ones, particularly depicted as wearing a black cloak, a pointed hat, and flying on a broomstick. Another definition is an ugly or unpleasant woman. These were the definitions that I got for witch online in the major dictionaries. And I want to correct that. These definitions are based on pop culture and, again, based on Eurocentric. That is how witches in Europe may have looked, may have dressed, but this is mostly a pop culture depiction and a Eurocentric cultural definition of what a witch is. Completely different in African spirituality. And along with the scripture about Mordecai covering his head, here it says a pointed hat and flying on a broomstick and a black cloak. Yeah, those things are true, especially, like I said, when you're talking about Eurocentric lore and culture. But they missed a few things. Having a cat, having an animal familiar, and one of the main things, striped socks. That's something that witches wear. We wear socks a certain way. And again, that can deal with the more of the pilgrimage, Eurocentric witchcraft that mingled with the indigenous witchcraft when the pilgrims came to America. And we're confronted with the Native American women and men who were practicing an earthly spiritual form of craft. And I want to reiterate too that these definitions here are referring to one aspect of being a witch, which is a hag or a crone. In Vodun, and again, this is something I have to write a book on because, again, Vodun is an oral tradition. That's why people always say, write a book, write a book. Well, you need to be learning from me as well, because Vodun is an oral tradition. I have mysteries. I have a book of shadows. I will come up with that eventually. But, I will publish it, so to speak, eventually. But, it's an oral tradition. And so I just wanted to talk about certain things. These definitions relate to a crone, also known as a hag. That is one aspect of the trinity of the female principles, the feminine principles of witchcraft. Witchcraft is a feminine principle of the craft. Being a mage or magic is a masculine principle of it. So a hag is, so to speak, that older, more unpleasant. You have a crone that may be the older woman, but a crone does not have to look decrepit. A crone could be the oldest or the wisest witch of a particular trinity, or that could be her role. But crone also refers to crown and dealing with some mysteries of Yansan. So again, when we're talking about different aspects of witchcraft, and we're talking about the European definition of a witch, which is marginalizing a witch to being a hag, an undesirable, evil woman who is powerful. European culture. That's how European culture defines witches and women in general, so to speak. Now, in African spirituality, I want to be clear, you have the Iyamin, and the trinity of the Iyamin, the trinity of witchcraft, is understood through the mysteries of the primary Iyamin, meaning the primary colors or primary feminine principles, which are Oshun, which deals with the virgin, Yemaya, which deals with the mother, and Yansan, which deals with the crone. So the trinity of witches is Virgin Mother Crone, or the Maiden Mother and Crone. And in African spirituality, I don't know if I want to get too much into that, but I just want to mention that a virgin, in terms of the feminine principles, is not a woman who abstains from sex. It's a woman who abstains from pregnancy. There's a huge difference. It's not a woman who abstains from sex. It's a woman who abstains from pregnancy and motherhood for particular reasons relating to the power of the virgin aspect of the female trinity. All right. And that virgin aspect, that Oshun aspect, deals with the beautiful witch, the good witch, the enchantress. Oshun representing honey, or in this case of the Iyamin, sweet water. And Oshun representing the witch that is loved. Yemaya represents the salt water, that healing force, and she would be the oracle. And again, remember, Oshun, Yemaya, and Yansan are all mothers. So in the case of the female principles of witchcraft, Yemaya is not marginalized to being that maternal figure. They are all mothers. That's what Iyamin means, the sacred mothers. But in this instance, Yemaya rules the aspect of the Trinity that, essentially unites the virgin powers and the crone powers into wisdom of the oracle. And so this deals with the gift of salt water, which heals. Oshun has that fresh water, which nourishes. That salt water, which heals, being the oracle, having divine wisdom and insight, and being able to use that for healing or destruction. And Yemaya represents the witch that is respected. All right, so going on, Yansan represents blood and represents the uses of the menstrual blood and the menstruation that women experience into the craft. She represents the crone, and she has that power of destruction. Okay, and that's why Yansan represents the crone, or the aspect of the witch that is feared. So again, in African traditions, a witch is not marginalized to the definition of really what is a hag. And a hag is a European, a form of a succubus, a European form of a succubus. And a hag is a crone that intentionally goes around feeding off of the youthful sexuality of literally younger women, or literally beautiful women, particularly women who may have a male figure in their life, or may have children, or may have those gifts in life, or those energies that a hag could feed off of. I'm making my matcha as usual, getting distracted. Let me get that together. So, an example of a hag, and I know I'm getting off subject a little bit, but I'm going to come back to witch being the root word of craft. There's an example of a hag. I watched a news video yesterday, and I don't know if this was recent. It could have been as far back as 2016. I don't recall the dates and times of the video, but this was these are white people. This is, I say that because I have a different audience. You know what I'm saying? I speak to a lot of different people, but I typically, as Black High Priestess, my purpose is to reestablish sacred femininity in Black women, elevate Black women to our proper position. You know what I'm saying? So, but I have other people in my audience. So, when you see, Black people, we tend to say that, if someone's Black or white, because in white society, is the status quo is being white, but that's not necessarily the case in Black society. We'll say, these are white people, so to speak. I know it doesn't matter, but that's just how we talk sometimes. But the news article, the news video, basically was showing a family that lived in a townhome, and they had a live-in nanny. So that live-in nanny was, had a room in the home and also had the responsibility of doing duties. Well, what happened was she became a squatter, and she stopped doing her nanny duties in terms of taking care of the children and the home and things. And she just started living there. But because of legalities and state laws, that woman was protected from being kicked out of this townhome. And remember, it's not like a townhome, like, townhomes in the suburbs where I grew up. They were bigger, but they were also homes that were connected to another home as well too, kind of like apartment buildings, but they were townhomes. But townhomes also means a bigger type of home, not necessarily like a mansion or something. But I don't know the literal definition, but if you all know what a townhome is, the woman who moved in and started squatting, the nanny, she was still in the same space. She just had her own room and, her own room and board within the same space as the family. It was their townhome, but they couldn't evict her because of state laws, because they hired her to live in and to have that room and board. And the wife, was very, frustrated with the situation, and she got to the point where she had to put a bike lock around the fridge door so this crone who I'm talking about, this woman who is squatting, couldn't eat their food. And what I want to say is this: she said something specific too that let me know that you're dealing with a witch, a crone. She said that every time she would go ask this older woman, and this woman was older and unattractive, and every time she would ask this woman, why won't you do your duties? Why won't you leave? Why won't you, either start being a nanny again or leave and go somewhere else? She said she would just close her door and smile at her. That is very symbolic of this being a crone. One, that smile. You got to be careful of a witch's smile, because a lot, people know that Oshun laughs when she's angry, so you have to be careful of that cunning of a witch. And this woman is a crone because she literally found a way to move in and become a fixture in this younger, more beautiful, married with children female. And now this crone has latched onto this woman, and she can't get rid of her. And now she's legally living in that woman's home. That is what a hag does. A hag is a crone witch, an older witch, or that crone aspect of a witch who is feared because of her powers. And a hag is an older, uglier woman who intentionally feeds off of younger, more beautiful women who may be married with children, or may just have the powers of a virgin or a mother in the female trinity. And getting into more ancient African spirituality, you're talking about a succubus. But in European and Eurocentric lore, These definitions of a witch refer to a hag. Why? Because white women don't age typically. White women do not age as gracefully as black women. And again, that deals with the European culture, which is related to the climate and the genetics that come about from that climate. And with recessive genetics, the women don't typically age gracefully and as beautifully as women with dominant genetics. And so they are considered ugly or unpleasant, an ugly or unpleasant woman. But the reality of it is you're talking about a hag. And here's another mystery. I'm giving away too much, but sometimes witches and enchantresses disguise ourselves as hags in order to test the heart of someone, or in order to test the heart of a suitor. Can this man see you for who you are? Is a person's heart balanced with that of a feather? Remember, there's a lot of angels that are disguised as homeless bums. A lot of enchantresses that are disguised as hags in order to test the heart of people. That's one way the Most High works in mysterious ways. So what I want to do is I want to give you all a more a broader and more a more appropriate definition of what a witch is from a bloodborne witch, as Black High Priestess. Again, a woman thought to have magical powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as wearing a black cloak, pointed hat, and flying on a broomstick, or an ugly or unpleasant woman. These are definitions of a hag or of a crone, and these are Eurocentric definitions. The definition I want to present is a witch is a person. It doesn't have to be a woman, but it is a feminine principle. That's why typically witches are women and mages are warlocks, which is, a principle of magic that is related to war and conflict. Warlocks tend to be men, mages, you know what I'm saying? So my definition of a witch is a person skilled at manipulating forces of nature. And to elaborate, a person skilled at manipulating forces of nature for healing, protection, destruction, or wisdom, receiving mysteries, and a person skilled at interacting with the spirit realm. These are more accurate definitions of what a bloodborne witch is. It is a person who is skilled at manipulating forces of nature and interacting with the spirit realm. Now, if you take that more accurate definition of witch that takes away Eurocentricity and European perspective, and that takes away a human's idea of what a witch is, and actually is coming from a bloodborne witch, you will understand why I say witch is the root word of craft. What is the definition of craft? And again, this is a definition I got online. Craft, an activity involving skill in making things by hand. And as a verb, it is skill in making something. Another definition of craft is skill used in deceiving others. So getting back to the principles, this definition of craft is accurate, and it relates to why I say witch is the root word and the root work of craft, because craft is directly related to being skilled at making things. Peace, Labaki. Hey, what I'm gonna call you, flying ninja on that trapeze and all the rest. Hey, Labaki. Man, I was just talking to Brave Monk about you and everything. We gotta catch up soon. Miss you, love you. And I'm kind of talking about Yoruba, Vodun and everything, because I learned Vodun mostly through the Yoruba traditions of Vodun and the Orisha. But anyway, what up? Again, the definition of craft here: an activity involving skill in making things by hand or skill used in deceiving others. These are two very accurate definitions from the dictionary that actually speak to the masculine and feminine principles of craft, of the craft. The craft meaning witchcraft, meaning the craft that witches and mages practice, which involves our skill in, like I said, manipulating forces of nature and interacting with the spirit realm. An activity involving skill in making things by hand. That's the feminine principle of the craft, witchcraft. Skill used in deceiving others. That is the masculine principle of magic, creating illusions. Witchcraft. So why do I say that witch is the root word of craft? Because craft here is involving skill in making or deceiving. My definition of a witch is a person skilled at manipulating forces of nature or interacting with the spirit realm. When you're talking about being a craftsman or a craftswoman, you're talking about having a particular skill set that stands apart, or that is outstanding because it stands out from the rest. So craft is directly related to making things. It's directly related to an art. That's why they call it arts and crafts. But in my last upload, I mentioned that it should be called arts and skills, because craft is the craft. And that is based on the mage or the witch who is practicing the craft, who is making something, who is creating illusions and deceiving. So being a witch is, and then here's the last definition: root. So the definition of root that I got online: the part of a thing attaching it, and there was, by the way, there was several definitions of root. I just got the ones that were most relative to responding to this question. So the definition of root: the part of a thing attaching it to a greater or more fundamental whole. Witch being the root word of craft. Being a witch or a mage is the part of craft attaching it, the part attaching it to the fundamental whole. So being skilled at manipulating forces of nature, which that deals with the Orisha, that deals with the Loa, which are mysteries, that deals with elements, literal roots, herbs and spices, literal roots, but also the root of that word comes from being a gifted person, being skilled at the supernatural. All right. Another definition of root: the end or base of something. The end or base. Another definition, and the root word of basic is base. So here's a third definition: the basic cause, or the base cause, the basic cause, source, or origin of something. So the origin of being a craftsman or a craftswoman is being a witch, is being a person skilled at manipulating forces of nature. Metal is a part of nature. In Yoruba or in Vodun, we refer to the force of nature known as metal. We refer to that as Ogun. All right. Another definition: the essential substance or nature of something. Again, the essential nature of being a craftsman or a craftswoman is being a witch. Being gifted, being skilled at manipulating forces of nature. That is the essential nature of craftsmanship, or of the craft in general. You all know the movie The Craft. You know, that's in reference to the culture or the occult. The craft is a term that describes the esoteric culture of blood-born mages and witches. And the craft is in reference to whether you are solitary or a social practitioner. If you are blood-born, it doesn't matter whether you do it socially, religiously, or solitary, or whatever ethnic heritage you have of the craft. You practice the craft. All right. That's why I, in my upload, which was talking about bloodline traits of the craft, that is why I made the statement, which is the root word of craft. Because craft is directly related. The origin of craft, again, the origin of activity involving skill in making things by hand or skill used in deceiving others. The origin of being crafty is being a witch. That's where that comes from. And so now, you know, people may be starting to think about technology and different things and how craftsmanship helps build societies. If you understand African traditions, you will understand how everyone had an important role in society and why people who were gifted with manipulating forces of nature or communicating and interacting with the spirit realm were deemed very important in African traditions. The root work is, again, the root word is witch. The root work comes from witchcraft. Using roots for healing, for creating potions, essentially, or being a witch doctor, which ironically in African traditions is referring to a man who uses witchcraft. Men are called witch doctors who practice witchcraft. Again, I deal with the masculine and feminine principles of the craft. That is my right as Black High Priestess, among other things. And so, you know, hopefully in answering these questions, you all understand what I'm here for, you know, and as Black High Priestess, what my services and my responsibilities to the community are about. Creating balance between masculine and feminine principles and raising awareness of what it means to be a witch, what it means to be initiated in Vodun, what it means to have a relationship with the Most High. Witches are not just evil. Evil it's not about being a good witch or a bad witch. It's about being a good person or a bad person. There's good people and there's bad people. That boils over to any identity. There's good Black people, there's bad Black people. And I prefer good and evil because when you're talking about good, you're talking about essentially a virtue. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about the virtues and you're relating it to evil. You know, what's bad for one person may not be bad for the next person. So it's important to understand that you're comparing good to evil because bad is too arbitrary. So I want people to understand that, there are a lot, and that's another thing, exposing witchcraft, especially in the Black community, where Black people are very marginalized and very religious in backward ways. Black people, now a lot of New Age Black people hate the Bible, but aren't actively practicing witchcraft. How you hate the Bible, but then are afraid of witchcraft too. You know what I'm saying? So, and the reality of it is being a witch or a mage is it's a bloodline trait, but it also speaks to that straight and narrow of having faith in yourself, having faith in a higher power, but also exercising your traits while giving praise to the Most High. That's something that I do. You know what I'm saying? Personally, to each their own. That's just me. I give glory to the Most High. And I feel that that's important because I do believe in creation. And I know that powers can be taken away. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. People can lose their beauty. People can lose, a mystery of oracles. We're talking about beauty, but a woman, things can happen where a woman can lose her beauty. But as long as she knows that it comes from an inside place, it's going to resonate no matter what happens to her physical appearance. Her beauty will resonate spiritually. An oracle can lose the gift of oracle by sleeping with the wrong man. Ironically, being an oracle is more related to abstaining from sex than being a virgin within the Trinity. Mysteries. But again, when you're giving honor to the Most High and you're allowing, as an oracle, you're allowing the Most High to be your lover, so to speak. You're allowing the Most High to inseminate in you visions and dreams and mysteries that you can then, orate to other people and help them with. Giving credit to the Most High. Blood, being a crone. That's still, that's to me, that's still being feared. That still comes from giving glory to the Most High by acknowledging that our blood represents our gender role as women as well. And that the blood speaks to the woman's womb being a womb and a tomb. And that deals with Yansan and back to the mystery of the barons that I kind of started out talking about, my Ejuli Bridget mystery. Yansan deals with that sacred blood, and that speaks to the feminine gender being created in the image of the man, being the weaker vessel, but also having powers of destruction within our womb that can be projected during our menstrual cycle, that purging, that ability for us to hold and take in, but our menstrual cycle allows us to purge and to express the and combat the oppression by showing that we have a certain level of control over men. And again, I don't want to talk too much about that because there's mysteries of being a crone and why the crone is arguably, definitely though, the most powerful feminine principle of being a witch. Because a crone has a level of wisdom and experience where she can use these uncanny gifts to compete and combat patriarchy or abuse from men. That's why that crone aspect is feared, because when there's masculine and feminine principles that are balanced, men are protecting and providing for the women. But the crone has the power to step in and bring men to justice who are not fulfilling their gender role, but who are abusing their gender role by raping women, leaving women to be single mothers, marginalizing women, doing all these things. That's where the crone steps in. That's where that blood comes in, using these feminine principles to combat dysfunctional patriarchy and male dominance and male abuse. Yansan, or Danto as well. So, just to reiterate, the reason that I say that being a witch, or witch, the word witch, or the term witch is the root word of craft, it is because having the bloodline trait of a witch is the root or the essential nature, the base, or the fundamental whole, the foundation of being crafty. A skill is a definition of craft, but being crafty is more than being skilled. Skill has its own definition, but why does craft have a different? And I didn't look up the definition of skill, but that's a good thing to look up. But remember, when you're talking about craft, the root of being crafty is being a witch. And again, we're not just talking about women. My definition of a witch is a person skilled at manipulating forces of nature or interacting with the spirit realm. Remember, there are witch doctors, formerly known as mages, which again does not only have to be men. A mage is a person who uses magic. Magic is a masculine principle of witchcraft, a masculine principle of the craft. That's why I use the term the craft, because the masculine principle is magic and the feminine principle is witchery. All right. So you have mages, you have warlocks, you have wizards, shamans. You have witch doctors. Those are all masculine principles of the craft. In witchcraft, you have witches, you have enchantresses, you have sorceresses and sorcerers, but you don't have wizards. Why don't you have female wizards? And that's something I talk about, and that's another mystery too. There are male witches, there are male sorcerers, but there is not a female wizard. That is a mystery. And that is related to the fact that the man was created first in the image of the creator. The female was created in the image of the man. That is based on belief. I'm not going to say that is factual, that's scientific. That does have a lot to do with what you believe. But it would behoove you to ask yourself why me, a blood-born, actively practicing witch, holds the belief that I was created by the Most High in the image of the man who was created in the image of the Most High. There's no female wizards. There's enchantresses, sorceresses, virgins, oracles, crones, even being a princess. That has to do, there's king's blood, and then there's virgin blood, which is really princess blood. Those are other mysteries too. these are some things that I have to offer, especially for Black women who really need some real sacred feminine guidance from somebody who knows these things and is not marginalized to, for lack of a better word, nigger shit. All right. If anyone else has any questions, let me know. I pretty much got my tea, my matcha latte pretty much ready, so I'm gonna hang out with you all a little bit longer. Turn this up. I guess no one has any questions, huh? Yeah, so I want to reiterate one more time with the Iyamin, the Trinity of the feminine principles. The Trinity, the female Trinity, like you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, that deals with the Most High, the red sun, and the black sun. All right, so you got the Father, which is the Most High, the Son, which is the Son, the red sun, the righteousness, and the Holy Spirit, which is the mysterious ways that the Most High operates in that come from Vodun, that Papa Legba on the left-hand path of the throne of God, of the Most High, rules. Christ rules righteousness. Christ's consciousness is about exercising righteousness and living in a righteous way, according to essentially the commandments and the testament and the covenant. But remember, more importantly, being Christ-like deals with the New Testament ways that Christ taught. It deals with the teachings of Christ. The covenant is directly related to the bloodline trait that the Israelites only have with the Most High. The root word of covenant is coven. And we all know that witches are part of a coven. The coven of the covenant is the Iyami. So the masculine trinity is the Father, the Most High, the Son, Christ, and the Holy Spirit, Papa Legba, holding the mysteries of the covenant that relate specifically, and dare I say only, to the bloodline Hebrew Israelites, which are black people. In this day and age, a lot of Hebrew Israelites have lost their bloodline trait of melanin. Melanin is a requisite. But, we have New Age now. And that's where you get the Congo and the Rada spirits, which can inhabit any host. Not only ones who have that black bloodline trait and that genetic of Series B Vodun, but any host that they actively choose to inhabit and to bless or to mount. All right, that's why people may not have a dominant genetic phenotype, but may still earn mysteries of Vodun in this day and age. Interracial mixing during the slave trade created a culture, an esoteric culture where different orders of spirits can inhabit those whose genetics have receded from ancient Africa, but they still are related to the slaves that brought Vodun over to the New World at that time. And remember, Africans had already been to North America and South America. That wasn't our first time going. That was involuntary when them Spaniards took us over. Africans had already traveled the world already. Read it in the Bible. Black people had already traveled all over the world by sea. Slavery was a time and place that created a lot of social, that created modernity and the new age and all of this appropriated stuff. And that's one thing as Black High Priestess I do, is I take the appropriation out of the craft, out of mysticism. Like I said here, this original definition of a witch, is related to Eurocentric fear and loathing of women. That's why things are appropriated for the recessive genetic, because the recessive genetic is just that. It can't it can't access the dominant genetics without a dominant genetic host. Whereas dominant genetics are essentially the origin of all things that recede from it. Essentially, two Caucasians cannot have a African baby, but two Africans, even if they are albino, two genetically dominant people can have a albino baby, can have a Caucasian baby, just as much as they can have a Black African baby. That is the essential definition of dominant and recessive genetics. And I don't really have to go into that, because that is science that we learn from white people. That is white science. White science tells you, that blue eyes and blonde hair are recessive genetic. So they, so to speak, they themselves know and understand their lineage and their lack and their incapacitation from having recessive genetics. In Africa, people may have had leprosy or had albinism, which did cause health complications. But remember, recessive genetics doesn't directly come from albinism. It comes from migration of Japheth's lineage to the Caucasus Mountains and to colder climate that was not as conducive to warmer climates, and the heritage that comes from that migration into those colder climates and inhabiting those colder climates. Keep in mind, Eskimos are Black, darker than me even. Eskimos lived in cold climate, but because Black people are of the elements of water, white people being of the element of fire, Indians, natives being of the element of earth, and Asians being of the element of air. Because Black people are the element of water, the Black Eskimos didn't use fire as much as the white people use fire in cold climate, because fire, not the sun, which is the original source of fire and heat, but combustible fire, speaking to that recessive genetic that needs other elements to come into play for it to exist. That is fire. The sun doesn't need other elements to come into play. Black people, we feed off of the sun. White people, their element is fire, not the sun, but fire, because the white recessive genetic needs other elements to come into play for its success and supremacy and survival. That's what fire is. Fire needs to be fed. But my point is, the Caucasians in the Caucasus Mountains were utilizing fire, whereas the Eskimos lived in igloos, not caves. Like the Caucasian, you know what I'm saying, and everything. The Eskimos lived in igloos, did ice fishing. The Eskimos were, like Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra show that the water tribe were Black people who water bent. And that speaks to the elements that coincide with each racial genetic. Oh, they're about to cut me off now. So, I'll leave you all with that. Thanks for listening. Peace and love. And let me know if you have any questions.